Well, a sophisticated new research report published by the US National Bureau of Economic Research charts new findings in how divorce is not a temporary bump in the road for children. It has long-term negative effects far into adulthood. Now, of course, this isn't a new finding, but this new study does chart some important ground and conducted by scholars at University of Texas, University of Maryland, and the US Census Bureau. They've examined data of over 5 million children. Now, Glenn Stanton is the Director of Global Family Formation Studies at Focus on the Family. He's a good friend of Family First. He's spoken at our forum on the family previously, and Glenn has also written extensively about this new study. Glenn, great to have you on the show. Really appreciate your time. Look, just getting straight into the study, it's the University of Texas and the University of Maryland. So I guess this can't be just discounted as moral panic from right-wing conservatives, can it?
Yeah, by no stretch. I mean, first of all, like the sociology department, and this actually comes from the Department of Economics from the University of Texas at Austin and the University of Maryland, but also another scholar from the U.S. Census Bureau was a part of this. And these are leading economists. And in fact, it was published by the National Bureau of Economic Research, the NBER. And that is an absolutely world elite group of economic researchers. And so, yeah, like this is great research. This is super, super respectable.
Okay, but I am struggling to find much media interest in this. I mean, has the media been interested in this new study? The mainstream media?
Well,
the legacy media?
It's super interesting that you're right. I mean, and this is an indictment of the media. This is a very good study. It does some really groundbreaking stuff. It comes to some really strong conclusions. But yeah, it's only been the conservative media that has picked this up and shown any real interest in it. And so that is unfortunate.
Okay, let's have a look at the findings, because I guess, as you all know from all your study and the books you've written and from what I've researched, it's not hard to come to a conclusion that divorce, breakdown of family, is always going to have negative effects. I don't think anybody argues about that. I don't think anybody is going out celebrating the outcome and the effects of divorce. So what is new about this study, and what are the new findings, do you think? What new ground has this charted?
Well, let me play off something that you just said. And like I've been studying the effects of divorce from the secular mainstream research for decades. And what we find over the top is that the negative outcomes, the long-term negative outcomes of divorce for kids is far worse and far long lasting and deeper than anybody ever imagined. And this research adds to that knowledge, that understanding. And so what this research did was it looked at, like you said, 5 million kids, but in that was a subset of 1 million sibling settings. So one of the things that they were able to do was, one thing that pessimists to this divorce research say is, well, you know, these kids from divorce show negative outcomes because the marriage that they came from, the family they came from, was troubled, and that led to the divorce. Well, this mitigates that, and it looks at young kids within a family, and it looks at a section in time, and it says, in these sibling groups, the older kids spend most of their time in an intact family, and they have certain outcomes. But then the younger kids in that sibling group experience divorce for a long part of their childhood, and they face significant negative detriments relative to their siblings from the same family. So these scholars can tell that the experience of the parental divorce, the death of these kids' parents' marriage, had a lightning bolt effect in their life that created a handful of negative and really consequential outcomes. And so that's a new angle on this research is again looking very deeply at divorce within sibling groups.
Okay, so maybe just give us some top line findings. Although once again, and I guess let's have a bit more discussion about this. But what does it show around, for example, teen births, incarceration rates, income, whether they go to college or not,
Yeah.
academic outcome? What's it show?
Well, super stunning on that. It shows that teen births increased. Like these kids are going along, they're living their lives, their parents announce their divorce, and then the kids go through the divorce. And post divorce, these kids' teen birth rates increased 60%. That's not just pregnancy rate, that is teen birth rates increased 60%. Early
Wow.
death, Bob, early death increased from 35 to 55%. I mean, that's insane that a child's risk of dying
Mm.
in early death in early adulthood increases from 35 to 55%. Jail time increased from 40 to 45%, and earnings were substantially less, from 9% to 13%, their non divorced peers in adulthood. And they said this was equal to obtaining about 1 year less education. So divorce leaves a real significant negative impact on these kids' lives. These kids also, both their mothers and their fathers, after divorce, face significantly reduced income and household income. And they said that 10 years after divorce, that those families only made up about half the subtraction of income post divorce. And
Yeah.
so, lack of household income and significant lack of household income drives all kinds of things to quality of education, the kind of food and nutrition, the medical care that the child can get, the neighborhood that they live in. That's another thing that they noted is kids post divorce, they tend to move into poorer neighborhoods because their parents don't have the money to, maintain the life that they had before. The other is there's crime, greater crime in lower neighborhoods, lowered
Mm.
economic or education ability in those neighborhoods. So
Mm.
just across the board, a number of important child well-being qualities are diminished and lessened when parents leave their marriages.
So this looked at the effect on children, but it didn't look at the effect on the adults themselves, did it? I mean, that's separate
It
research,
it
isn't it?
it didn't, only in the sense that it showed economic decline for the husband and the wife, and the economic decline was usually stronger for the woman because she's the one who usually, like 95% of the kids after divorce went to
Mm.
reside with mom, and so she has that heavier load. But dad's income diminished as well. But yeah, this was primarily looking at the outcomes of divorce on children.
Okay, now there'll be some people watching this that will say, well, we had to get out of the marriage. I mean, this was an abusive marriage. Divorce wasn't really an option. And there will be legitimate concerns around that, abusive relationships. So
Yeah.
has it taken that into account?
Well, it does, in the sense that looking at sibling groups within the relationship, because
Right.
again,
Mm.
if this were an abusive relationship, it has been
Mm.
an abusive relationship.
Mm.
And those things are typically ongoing. But first of all, Bob, and I know that you're throwing that out as a challenge that we hear, but when you're talking about divorce, all the time abuse comes up. Just like every time you talk about abortion, you talk about life of the mother. Like what about the mother who needs her life saved? I mean, like we need to understand that when we hear that, yes, some marriages are truly abusive. But there's been research that shows that only a third of divorces that ever happen are really truly abusive relationships. Abusive is an elastic term, and oftentimes it means there was just not peace in our house and we were just not getting along, you know? Well, that's up to the adults to work that stuff out. And that's important that adults work that stuff out. And hopefully, research like this reminds parents that, hey, maybe we should really, really, really work on doing the tough, tough, tough work of behaving ourselves, treating each other more kindly, not taking digs at one another, not being so bitter with one another, so that our kids have the kind of family security and marital security that the research says will serve them better.
Yeah.
So you ask a good question, but we always need to take that abuse accusation. Not that, when it comes forth, people are lying or people are not telling the truth, but that's a very elastic term. And we're talking about the death of a marriage, the death.
Mm.
Pat Conroy, the great novelist, he said that every divorce is the death of a small civilization, a family.
Mm.
And we need to take that very seriously.
Yeah. Yeah. It is the breakdown of the family. I guess the other issue, Glenn, and I am playing devil's advocate here, is that there will be people watching whose parents did get divorced and
Yeah,
they've actually come out okay. And so I guess the question is, when parents do divorce, does that necessarily mean that a child is going to be slapped with,
right,
um,
right,
going to end up in jail, going to end up early pregnancy, going to end up not attending college, is going to suffer in all
right.
these areas? So I guess, are there some redeeming factors or some saving graces that get people through this tragic situation?
Yeah, and that's the other thing that we have to be honest. And I have to be honest about that as an advocate for marriage and somebody who does not like divorce. Divorce is a horrible thing. Divorce does a number on kids. There can be some benefits of it,
Mm.
in the sense of, you know what? We did live in a truly abusive situation, and my parents were arguing all the time. And I wish I could wave a magic wand and they could all be together. But you know what? It's
Mm.
nicer to be in a peaceful situation. But we do need to understand that this is economic research, sociological research. And this doesn't mean that every child of divorce will be cursed for life. But what it means is divorce puts rocks in, and rocks of a different load, a varying load, in all kids' backpack, and it weighs them down. It's hard, it's difficult. And for some that's very, very hard. It's very debilitating. It goes with them through the rest of their life. Others are a little more resilient and they're able to kind of shake out of it. But no kid goes just whistling away from their
Mm.
parents' divorce saying, "Oh yeah, whatever, nothing here." But this sociology tells us, it looks at large populations, and it says that, say, in a community with a 10% divorce rate or a community with a 30% divorce rate, that community with a 10% divorce rate is going to have fewer kids who get pregnant early or impregnate somebody early, or who have
Mm.
an early death, or who are facing increased jail time. So no,
Mm.
it's not going to affect all the kids. But when we think about the good of a community, we have to think about divorce rates, marriage rates, cohabitation rates, because those things impact the children of the community, the kind of
Mm.
society that we have. And we as a collective people should always advocate for as much marriage as we can possibly have, and as few and little divorce as we possibly can have, and as few or little cohabitation, things like that, as we possibly can have. Because on the
Mm.
average, children do better when their parents, their biological parents or adoptive parents, hang together in a loving, self-sacrificing, long-term, enduring marriage.
Yeah, I like the fact that you've said, look, this isn't a moral piece of research. It's based around economics and sociological
Yeah.
outcomes. It's objective, uh, but for you and I, and for many of our watchers, we are coming from a moral
Mhm.
understanding of the importance of marriage and holding families together. Uh, but I still can't. I mean, I probably know why the legacy media, why the current culture doesn't want to go near these findings, because they really challenge the outcomes of the way people are wanting to live their lives these days, isn't it? And how we've cheapened marriage. And so it's a pretty inconvenient
Well,
truth what this research is showing.
no, you're absolutely right, Bob. It's a very inconvenient truth because it is contrary and counter to the sexual revolution. And, like you don't want to be the old church lady, like Satan's behind all that. But, like, no, they're pushing a narrative that options and
Yeah,
opportunities and
yeah,
freedoms are the greatest good.
yeah,
And staying in one marriage for one lifetime, raising those kids together in that relationship and confining sexuality to that, you know what? That kind of dampens people's groove. But the research actually shows that it doesn't. The sexual revolution has been a massive failure. Free sexuality, free divorce, cohabitation, trading partners, kids living in lots of different homes with lots of different parents. All the data shows that all of that has been a massive failure in terms of human well being and happiness. And the best thing to do is to live in a married relationship. I mean, Bob, it's the things that we believe, it's common
mm,
sense. And
mm,
all of those things run absolutely contrary to the larger media narrative. And so they're not going to report on these things. But these scholars, and they don't have a dog in this fight. I always say this, and I've said this for decades. There are really wonderful secular scholars who are doing good, careful, measured research, and they just want to follow the truth where the truth leads them. And this is an example of that kind of research. These people have a good methodology, they're careful in how they set things up, and they're just simply observing what happens when parents divorce. And they're honest about their findings. And that's why this is a very, very good study, an interesting study. And I would encourage people to check it out. But the other thing is, this is not just like a new study that
no.
that breaks new ground. This is data that has really augmented and documented what I've been seeing in my research over the past 30 years from good secular mainstream scholars who don't have a particular dog in this fight and they just want to do good, honest research.
So did the researchers, I didn't read the full report, but I know you've gone through it inch by inch. Did
Yeah.
it offer any solutions? Because I find that it's very easy for researchers and commentators to identify a problem, but then when it comes to the solution, because often it involves a moral truth and maybe a biblical ethic, they don't want to go anywhere
Yeah.
near it. Did the researchers in this paper offer any solutions?
You know what? It's interesting, Bob, because they didn't, and you've got to like know what their task is. These folks are economists. You know what? They look at numbers and measures, and they are interested in the outcomes of those numbers and measures. And I think, Bob, if these three scholars were on this show, they would say, "Yeah, absolutely, you got the data right." And if you ask them what's the prescription, they would say, you know what, we're not psychologists, we're not counselors, we are not family specialists. All we do is measure the things that we set out to measure, and we can tell you the outcomes. And you know what, like, good for you, stay in your lane, look at the things that you're looking at, and look at that and measure those things as honestly and objective as you can. But here's the other thing, they're human beings, they're in families, and they would probably say, you know what, if we were to offer a prescription, it would be this: parents, work as hard on your marriages and make yourself, um, allow yourself to the benefits that we have in the world of psychology that can strengthen marriages, that can help you work through the problems. Because our data as economists shows that if you go down to the divorce road, the risks that are going to be facing your children are too dire to just brush off.
Yep, and I mean, you've written some great reports for us on the whole
Mhm.
gender ideology and confusion. I mean, we've done reports on the link between family structure and family breakdown and child abuse, child poverty, incarceration rates, teen pregnancy. So no, this is not new findings. So I guess, Glenn, just to finish with, I know that your specific calling and specialty is in empowering churches, especially in church leaders, to respond to the
Mhm.
cultural challenges. Breakdown of
Yeah.
family and breakdown of marriage, the weakening of marriage, the redefinition of marriage. You know, we're just losing sight of just how important it is. So, I guess my final question would be: what is your message to church leaders and to church
Mm.
communities, families on this research? Because they probably already know that this is an
Yeah.
issue. This just adds to
Yeah.
the credibility of their views and the truth of Scripture. So,
Yeah.
what's your recommendations? What would you say to them?
You know what, Bob? I love that question because you're right. I look at the research, I look at data, but I'm a Christian and my faith is very, very important to me. And
Mm,
I work at Focus on the Family, and
mm,
that's what I do every day. And my message to people in the church, to pastors, would be believe your theology because it's right. At the end of the Old Testament, God
mm,
says in Malachi, I hate divorce. And this research is evidence as to why God hates divorce. Not all the
mm,
reasons
mm,
why, but one of the big reasons is because we are not wired for the breakup of either our own marriages or the marriages of our parents.
mm,
And God hates it because it's a violation of a covenant. It's
mm,
a violation of a union. God's own bride that is communicated in the Old Testament is just wildly unfaithful to him. His heart is toward fidelity. And that heart of God is wired deep within the human heart and the human psyche.
mm,
And when we go off and do our own things, it does not work well. And so my work as a sociologist, anthropologist, looking at research like this time and time and time again, the research backs up what I hear in the pew on Sunday morning from my pastor. And there's
yeah.
a connection between what the natural world is teaching us and what the divine world teaches us through scripture. And so that's what I would say is trust God, know God, and believe your theology because it is right and it is backed up by data.
And just finally, look, the role of the church is so important because, we know that when there is broken families, there is fatherlessness, there
Mhm,
is heartbreak, there is trauma. And that's where the church really
mhm.
needs to step up in terms of showing God to be the father to the fatherless, in terms of pastoral care, being
Yeah.
the family for that broken family, isn't it? Helping repair some of those um, broken pieces. So that's a really important role of the church, isn't it?
No, God our Father says, "I will be a father to the fatherless," and He's
Mm,
found within Christianity there.
mm,
And yeah, the church has a unique role there, a power, and that's another thing that I would encourage. I mean, we don't want to dog on the church. We want to say pastors, church leaders, church staff, you guys have a wonderful gift in the community of Christ to come along and love on a community that's hurting, that's breaking. And the church staff, they know that. They see that week after week after week, that they're able to meet people where they're at, but
mm,
also encourage them to say, hey, we know how to make relationships work too. And
mm.
relationships can be very fragile. And we have the skills, we have the abilities, we have the wisdom to help husbands and wives recover unhealthy marriages, for parents and their children to recover unhealthy relationships. And the church is very, very powerful there. That's one of its greatest gifts that it has to offer the world beyond the redemption of Christ himself.
Actually, just one quick question. I should have asked this earlier.
Yeah.
Did the researchers look at the faith, any religious adherence of the families and whether that had any effect?
No, they didn't. They didn't. I
Mm.
mean, that's an
Be
interesting
interesting.
question. And
Mm.
even as you say that, I'm like, yeah, as I read through it, like they
Let's do
they
it.
didn't address that at all. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Glenn, really appreciate your time. Thank you for doing that research for us on the research and giving us that summary. Probably, we could have come to this conclusion, but it's good to have that credible backing, and especially when it's coming from a sociological and economic aspect as well. It backs up what we already know in our hearts and minds and the importance of churches being family to broken families. So being part of that solution.
Yeah.
So Glenn, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.
You betcha, Bob. You're a good friend, and I appreciate being with you.